Hello everybody, it's Vertical Sandwich, and welcome back to Book Reviews. This is probably the last one I'm going to do in this session. And what we are doing is we are doing Roadside Picnic. So, Roadside Picnic is a 70s science fiction novel written by Arkady and Boris Strugatsky. Now, one of the things we have to keep in mind is this book did not win a Hugo Award, but this book was written behind the Iron Curtain in the middle of the Cold War. So, I can't speak to this book's recognition in Russia. I do know it was censored, partially. So there was a bit of putting this book back together. Once it was okay for this book to be out beyond kind of the Iron Curtain. And for those of you who don't know, that at one point in time, instead of there being a Russia, there was a gigantic conglomerate of countries called the United Socialist Soviet Republic. That was a traditional enemy of the United States. I don't know what that looks like from the other side. People in Russia right now can be watching me doing this book review, and for a guy who was, who remembers the fall of the Berlin Wall and stuff vividly, it's interesting for me to know that. Now, it's hard if you're a little younger to intellectualize the fact that at one point a huge chunk of the world was essentially boycotting the other huge chunk of the world. But this is true. This is true, that at one point the lion's share of Asia's landmass was covered by this huge bulk of stuff that by the way, I very distinctly remember just all being colored red on a map. Was largely antagonistic toward Europe and America, especially the United States of America, and vice versa. So during that whole mess, this book comes out, and it is censored by the government, and now it has been put back together, and Western audiences can read it, and I suggest they do because it's amazing. And this book is one of those books that when you read it, you just go, oh, that's where all that came from. Like, this is a visionary book. It is a visionary novel, this novel. The copyright on this is for 77. I believe it might have been serialized in 72. But you can't quote me on that. But 77 is the latest this could have come out. And Red Schuhart is a stalker. One of those misfits who are compelled, in spite of the extreme danger, to venture illegally into the zone to collect the mysterious artifacts the alien visitors left scattered around. His life is dominated by the place and the thriving black market in the alien products. Even the nature of his mutant daughter has been determined by the zone, and it is for her that he makes his last tragic foray into the hazardous and hostile territory. Okay, so the premise of this is there's a world where aliens landed. And they landed, and over the course of like 2 days, they landed, they took off, and the places that they landed, nobody saw them, nobody knows what they were like or what they looked like, but the places that they landed are changed in inexplicable ways. That they've been, and so governments cordoned them off because they're extremely dangerous. There are things in there that people don't know anything about, and there's no rhyme or reason for it. And the areas surrounding these zones are still inhabited areas, but the people there, the zones have had effects on them as well. And this guy, Red, illegally sneaks into the zones to steal artifacts that he can sell for money. He's like a looter, but he's a looter into an alien war zone that nobody understands. There are no aliens in these places. There are just these things that the aliens left behind. And the title of the book comes from one of the characters saying, imagine if you and I were on the road and stopped to have a picnic. And we had a picnic, and then we picked up and we left. And then something like an ant crawled up. What they would see is like the boxes and the things that we left behind, and they wouldn't understand them, and they would be these monumental things, but to us it was just the refuge. And they're like, maybe that's what this is for these aliens. They just stopped, and they hung out, and what they left behind is just their garbage, but for us, their garbage has fundamentally changed our lives because of how crazy it is. And it's not that's amazing about this. First off, this is, you read this and you just go oh, cyberpunk is coming. If you have any familiarity with with cyberpunk at all. Like, you read this and you just go, oh, this is like the blueprint for like Neuromancer and stuff. This kind of weird, off the wall technology kind of like dark, gritty reality stories. And a lot of sci-fi probably owes a lot to this book. I don't know how read this is by modern authors, but my guess is because somebody handed it to me and said like, oh, it's acclaimed, and there is a Sci-Fi Masterworks edition of it. I'm assuming that this is I mean, I didn't check into anybody saying anything about how influential this book is, but I feel that you can read the blueprints in 80s sci-fi in this. And like anything, music or literature, you know, events happen not in a bubble. That writers read other writers. That's why they're writers. And you know, I know when I write that I take on the narrative voice of things that I read. Like, I start thinking the way the author is telling me things, and then if I start writing, then I'll start writing in the narrative voice of this like author that I've. So it's hard for me to believe that this didn't influence a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about for Hugo Award winners. I can feel the Yiddish Policemen's Union in this. I can feel the City in the City in this, and I can feel Neuromancer in this. I'm not saying that those things are ripoffs. What I'm saying is that, you know, when we talk about sci-fi in the 60s that is kind of feel good and nice and story oriented and tries to wrap things up, and then we talk about something like this that just gives you the most bizarre circumstances possible and goes, nobody can explain it and we're not going to try. And stories don't really have resolutions, so just this is what happened and then it was done. That's a huge leap for me. And I love it because it does it really well. It does all of that stuff really well. And I'm going to read you a section of it right now. The blossoms had fallen off and it was the time for berries. Now the most important thing for us was total calm. There was no rush. The wind was gone. The visibility good. It was as smooth as silk. I could see the ditch where Slimy had kicked off. There was something colored in it, maybe his clothes. He was a lousy guy, God rest his soul. Greedy, stupid, and dirty. Just the type to get mixed up with Buzzard Burbridge. Buzzard sees them coming a mile away and gets his claws into them. In general, the zone doesn't ask who the good guys are, who the bad ones are. So thanks to you, Slimy. You were a damned fool and no one remembers your real name, but at least you showed the smart people where not to step. Of course, our best bet would have been to get onto the asphalt. The asphalt is smooth, and you can see what's on it, and I know that crack well. I just didn't like the look of those two hillocks. A straight line to the asphalt led right between them. There they were, smirking and waiting. Nope, I won't go between them. A stalker commandment states that there should be at least 100 feet of clear space either on your left or your right. So we can go over the left hillock, of course. I didn't know it was on the other side. There didn't seem to be anything on the map, but who trusts maps? Listen, Red, whispered Kirill. Why don't we jump over? 20 yards up and then straight down, and we're right by the garage, huh? Shut up, you jerk, I said. Don't bother me. He wants to go up. What if something gets you at 20 yards? They'll never find all your bones, or maybe the mosquito mange would appear somewhere around here. Then there wouldn't even be a little damp spot left of you. Headed up to here with those risk takers. He can't wait. Let's jump, he says. It was clear how to get to the hillock, and then we'd stay there for a bit and think about the next move. I pulled out a handful of nuts and bolts from my pocket. I held them in my hand and showed them to Kirill. Do you remember the story of Hansel and Gretel? Studied it in school? Well, we're doing it in reverse. Watch. I threw the first nut, not far, just like I wanted, about 10 yards. The nut got there safely. Did you see that? So? He said. Not so. I asked if you saw it. I saw it. Now drive the boot at the lowest speed over to the nut and stop 2 feet away from it. Got it? Got it. Are you looking for graviconcentrates? Graviconcentrates. I'm looking for what I should be looking for. Wait, I'll throw another one. Watch where it goes and don't take your eyes off it again. The second nut also went fine and landed next to the first one. Let's go. He started the boot. His face was calm and clear. Obviously he understood. They're all like that, the eggheads. The most important thing for them is to find a name for things. Until he had come up with a name, he was too pathetic to look at, a real idiot. But now that he had some label like graviconcentrate, He thought that he understood everything and life was a breeze. We passed the first nut and the second and a third. Tender was sighing and shifting from foot to foot and yawning nervously. He was feeling trapped, poor fellow. It would do him good. He'd knock off 10 pounds today. This was better than any diet. I threw a fourth nut. There was something wrong with its trajectory. I couldn't explain what was wrong, but I sensed that it wasn't right. I grabbed Kirill's hand. "Hold it!" I said. "Don't move an inch." I picked up another one and threw it higher and further. There it was, the mosquito mange. The nut flew up normally and seemed to be dropping normally, but halfway down, it was as if something pulled it to the side, and pulled it so hard that when it landed, it disappeared into the clay. "Did you see that?" I whispered. "Only in the movies." He was straining to see, and I was afraid he'd fall out of the boot. "Throw another one, huh?" It was funny and sad, one as though one would be enough. Oh, science. So I threw 8 more nuts and bolts until I knew the shape of this mange spot. To be honest, I could have gotten by with 7. But I threw one just for him to smack into the middle. So I threw one just for him, smack into the middle, so that he could enjoy his concentrate. It crashed into the clay like it was a 10-pound weight instead of a bolt. It crashed and left a hole in the clay. He grunted with pleasure. So, that's the thing, is there's just areas where gravity doesn't work right, and there are basements of buildings filled with stuff that'll melt your bones, and then there's this thing that, like, makes tremendous noises and earthquakes in the night, and they think it's like a living thing, but they don't even know, and they've named it. And then there's this thing called the Mangler, and there's a rumor that somewhere in the zone is, I believe, a golden orb that will grant your wishes. Like, it's just that. And you just go with that. You just, like, that's the world these people live in. Like, now go. And yes, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. And that's about all I can tell you about the plot, because that's all there is to the plot. It's just that. There's just that. There's just that happened. That's happened, and then people live around it, and this guy sneaks in there and steals things to sell to make money. And he has a host of criminal acquaintances and scientists in these, like, government agencies who work with these things, and that's it. And it's just the story of his life for a while. And then at the end, you get an ending. It's great. It's fantastic. It's so good. You need to read it. It's so good. It is so good. It is so good. It is absolutely, totally. It's just mind-blowing. It is so, you just, like, you read it. And by the way, it's short. It's super short. It's like a novella. It's like 140 pages. 140 pages. And you'll just be like, I've never been so amazed by 140 pages. It is, there are 4 of those in one of these. And, like, I just broke the book fourth wall or something. Yeah. It's amazing. It's the best, like, novella I've ever, like, maybe this is the best novella I've ever read. I don't know. I've read The Death of Ivan Ilyich, and things like that. And really, at that length, you can get The Great Gatsby there, and nothing beats The Great Gatsby. But it's a great book. It's an amazing book, and it's a sci-fi, like, stepping stone where you just read it and you just go like, oh, sci-fi is going to get really weird. Like, sci-fi is going to get really crazy. And this is a great start. And when we get into things like when we talk about kind of cyberpunk, it's going to be hard to not talk about this. When we talk about Neuromancer, and we eventually talk about Vert, because we will be talking about Vert because I love Vert. And it's not a Hugo Award winner, but it's a great sci-fi book. It's a great cyberpunk book. Now, that being said, like, yeah, this copy, I don't know. This is a Sci-Fi Masterworks copy, so I assume it's as complete as can be. There are multiple copies of this book. I would buy a later one because, like I said, it was censored and then kind of like, obviously redacted and unredacted and things like that. So this is like a good, this is the Sci-Fi Masterworks copy. This one is available wherever Sci-Fi Masterworks copies of suppressed Russian literature are available. Yeah. The ISBN is down here. And in the UK, this costs £8. In $7.99. There's no US dollars price on here. It's this is from OrionBooks.co.uk. So this came from a British publishing company to be in my hands somewhere in Wisconsin. That's kind of neat. I like that. Thank you, Internet. Now, those things being said, you should read Roadside Picnic. Roadside Picnic is a great book. Should I still have the book held up? I should. It's a great book that was lent to me by a friend because she said, like, hey, I know you like sci-fi novels. Here's a sci-fi novel. Like, it's great. And I read it and went, oh, it is great. And it is. It's great. it's a great novel if you're into the weird. If you're into fiction of the weird, this is like a thing to read. If what you want is a nice linear story that has a great beginning and a great ending, and like everything is wrapped up and you have no questions at the other end, this isn't your book. It's not. It's not. Go read the Foundation series by Asimov. Not a bad book, or not a bad book series, but like wrapped up. Or like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series wraps up really well. The Rama series wraps up really well. Or go read This Immortal. Go read This Immortal by Zelazny. It has an ending that wraps everything up in a nice little package. But this is open-ended and random. It just says this is what's going on with the universe, and you go, yeah, but why? And the book goes, nobody knows why, nobody cares. Just go with it. And they do it amazingly. They do it amazingly. So yeah. Oh, and apparently Tarkovsky's much-admired film Stalker was based on Roadside Picnic. Because that's what people who sneak in and steal stuff are called. They're called stalkers. So Red is a stalker in this novel. But you should read it. It's a quick read. Very entertaining book. Great concepts, and just has a beautiful feel for, I mean, if you really just want to think about the weirdness of a potential science fiction world, this one does it really great. So see you guys for our next book review. Thank you for watching. Bye, everybody.